Hello, and welcome to the Skillwork Forum. This podcast exists to help leaders and companies that are looking for innovative solutions to help solve skilled labor challenges across the country. I'm Tim, joined with my partner here, Brett, as usual from Skillwork. Today we're going to be talking about a really fun topic, something we call negative outcome. Sounds like a lot of fun to get into, but it's really important to talk about. So listen in as we delve into this and see if your company has similar challenges with your staffing and your onboarding, your personnel processes. So I guess it's probably best if we define this because it's a term not everybody uses. You're probably very familiar with the result, but maybe not the term. So for us, our company, anytime, for whatever reason, a candidate, a new hire, an employee does not complete an assignment, or if you do permanent hires, when an employee doesn't stay long term, for whatever reason, then we call that a negative outcome. It didn't come out the way we wanted it to. So, scenario for us or for you may be you go out and you research, you advertise, you find a candidate, you get them on board, you train them, and you turn them loose, and then for whatever reason, something goes south, something doesn't work out, situation unravels, sometimes very rapidly, sometimes over a period of time. For whatever reason, things don't work out the way you'd planned, and then you have to respond to that.
Yeah, no, and it is kind of, Tim, we experience it ourselves. Obviously, we'll talk about it a little bit later. We do a lot to try to get in front of this. I think companies, my experience, in my previous careers, we had a variety of manufacturing facilities, and because you're in such need to fill positions, you can really you have a tendency to maybe hope it's going to work, and so you take some chances. But even at that, you put a lot into the process, a lot of time, advertising, different things, and I always like to think of it. It's because, like you said, the unraveling can happen really fast, and we can take months to find the right candidate in our mind, and within a week everybody's gone, hey, John's not going to work, this isn't going to work, and it's almost like you went from dating to reality, and all of a sudden the guard comes down.
Yeah, exactly, like the honeymoon is over.
Yeah,
you're back from Bermuda, and all of a sudden this guy doesn't leaves his sink dirty or whatever it is. So, except it's a little bit more serious in your workplace. So yeah, it's very frustrating, and we've seen it from like a day to weeks, and it's like a drip, drip, drip. But for whatever reason, there's it doesn't work out. So we've got a couple of scenarios here, just to kind of level set everybody, so we all realize we're kind of on the same playing field with respect to when this doesn't work out. And the first one we like to talk about is just, hey, it's just not a good fit.
Yep. Yeah, you can, to your point, sometimes a person gets in, and whether it's, for whatever reason, it either the vetting wasn't quite right, maybe we didn't define the job quite right, or the needs. It's just culture not a fit. There's a variety of reasons why, for both the employee or the employer, they just come to that reality pretty quick. This just isn't a fit.
Yeah, and you touched on a number of ways where it's not a fit, and skills is the one we typically go to. They just didn't have the skill set we needed. But I think we shouldn't understate the importance of they're not a good culture fit, or their personality just didn't align well with their team or their supervisors. So there's a variety of things where the person is just, you recognize, not a good fit, and you got to make a change. So when that happens, we call that a negative outcome. That's the first scenario. The second one is, it could be that it's a great candidate, they have the skills that we want, but they're put into a culture or an environment that they weren't anticipating. So whether that's a toxic environment or just simply different. And oftentimes we'll have candidates that that will say something to the effect of, hey, this is not what I was expecting.
Oh yeah, no, it happens all the time. Like you said, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit, as we kind of look into some of the solutions to this. But I think some companies really struggle, and it can be we say it a lot. People don't leave companies. People leave bosses, and so maybe it can be at a very specific. That second shift supervisor. There's a pattern where they're losing people consistently. So maybe it's not company-wide toxic culture, but it can be in spots, and you have to be, as a company, you got to be willing to look at it.
Yeah, and the first scenario we talked about is the employee, is not a good fit for you, but in this scenario, it's that they're in a situation, whether it's just with that supervisor or their team they're in, that it's just not what they were anticipating. We'll talk about some of the ways you can avoid, a negative outcome, but I think one of them is just simply let people know up front what they're getting into so that they don't have this disillusionment, frustration, dissatisfaction, and it could be, let's say you go out and research and you recruit for somebody and you tell them that, man, this is super fast paced, where we're behind, you're going to be working a lot of hours, and they get there and it turns out not so much. We've had that where it's kind of
right.
slow, and the hard charger finds himself kind of a little bit disillusioned because they were expecting to jump in and get stuff done right away. So whatever the case is in that scenario, it's a negative outcome result, and it didn't work out. So the next one we talk about is that this one is really frustrating, Brett. It's like the candidate, we talk about it being ghosting,
Mm-hmm.
but when a candidate, we've gone through everything and they just, the last ninth hour.
Yeah, and we talk to a lot of companies, and the term ghosting, most people, are becoming familiar with when it's part of the hiring process, which tells you it's becoming more of an issue. And I don't know if it's just that there's a lot of opportunities that or just a variety of different reasons why it happens. But I mean, you can spend, we talk to companies, that happens to us, where you put, people go through, they do the vetting, they do the interviews, they do these things, and then suddenly they just go dark. They just literally, they just walk away. They don't. You would like to think they would at least call you and say, "Hey, I'm withdrawing."
Right.
But they just ghost. I mean, and so we talk to companies. That's a very frustrating outcome that turns into a negative. It's a negative outcome, although it really, you didn't even get started. It kind of stops at the altar. So.
For us, I mean, in our company, obviously, we're working with our clients to do all that front end work. So we feel that acutely because we do a lot of work to try to get those guys there. And for our companies we work with, it's just, they haven't shown up yet, so there's not as much investment. But for us, when we get that's something we work at all the time, trying to make sure we communicate, stay engaged, understand what's going on. Because you're right, Brad, and it reminds me of a few years back in a previous life when I was working to build a large team of software engineers and developers when they were in really high demand. I mean, those guys could get 3 job offers in one day, easy. So they would simply not show up, or show up for a week, everything's going great. Next thing you know, they just leave and say, I got another job, and they don't communicate with you. That's very frustrating, and that's what we call a negative outcome. So part of that could be cultural or a variety of reasons, but it's a reality. It happens. So there's probably a handful of other scenarios we could talk about, but the bottom line is I think you guys get what we're talking about here. When it doesn't work out for whatever reason, skills, personality, culture, environment, ghosting, you got a candidate that did not work out. So now what do you do about it? None of us are immune. Certainly in our business, we deal in the HR business and staffing business, and we're definitely not immune, but we can reduce it. We can minimize the impacts, and we've got a few things to think about here. And I think the first one, and we'll just go back and forth, talk about some of these things, Brett. The first one for us is, we learned this, is just get real. I mean, be honest, be completely transparent about the culture, about the environment they're going into, what the need is, what their demand is going to be, the hours they're going to be working, transparency and self-awareness about your company, and about, recognizing that you're trying to sell your business, you're trying to sell the opportunity, but you don't want to oversell it, right?
Yeah. I mean, no, it's kind of like you said, companies sometimes, I think, they have this huge need to win in this talent game, and so as a result, sometimes they try to paint, a bit of a better picture than what is reality, and I think that leads ultimately to typically a negative outcome normally, because people. So yeah, to your point, be very transparent. We find, in our process, if a guy knows he's going to be working 60 hours a week, and he knows that up front, or he knows, hey, this facility does this, or hey, it's going to be hot, or it's going to be cold, or you're going to be outside, you're going to be inside, whatever that is, just knowing seems to make a big difference.
Yeah, it's a lot like, I said an analogy earlier, it's like the dating and the marriage scenario. They're going to know you eventually.
Yeah.
So it works out far better in advance to just kind of be transparent with that. So I think we labor under the illusion that they won't come to our place if we tell them about the challenges. And that may be true, but you're far better off them not coming than to have them come, and then you have to go through, how do we pick up the pieces when it doesn't work out. So the getting real is a big deal. We're learning that all the time about being transparent. The second one, I think, is something we talk about all the time with our clients is, understanding and developing the requirements of what you must have, what you're really looking for in that job. And that gets to doing the hard work ahead of time to identify some of those things, so that, again, it's well known and well understood up front what you're asking for and what you're getting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, we define it in our process, and in our business, we've we're kind of sharing what we do. At the same time, if you apply these to your own hiring process, you need to think about it as well. But we call it, must-haves and nice-to-haves, and we've learned from experience that if a lot of companies who ask us to help them find the skilled trade talent that they need early on, especially when we bring on a new client, oftentimes it's really interesting. Companies, a lot of times, the head of HR or whatever, they really don't know exactly what it is they want, and so they'll say, "Oh, we need electricians," and then you find out when it really comes down to it, well, we really needed a mechanic.
Yes.
So we have to unpack that.
Yeah, or we need a PLC focused electrician or electronics. I mean, and I've done it. I'm guilty of it. Like, when I need to add staff, you get a requisition for a new employee, and you're like, well, here's the one we used last time. We'll grab it, tweak it a little bit, put it out there, and then we'll get it figured out in the onboarding and interview process. But it doesn't work out that way. You end up getting kind of a square peg for kind of a square hole, but it doesn't quite fit, and now you got a frustration because it's not the right fit. So avoid negative outcomes by knowing up front and stating very clearly what you're looking for, and being very detailed in that vetting process, that you're asking those specific questions. And it goes to interviews too, Brett. We see a lot of times the interviews, which is a key part of this, the interview questions go off on things that are really not crucial to the position. They're off on somebody has a specific thing they want to ask, or they have the question they always like to ask, but it doesn't really get to what's crucial to that position.
Oh, no,
kind of rambles
true.
a little bit.
Yeah, we, part of our process, we include our clients after we've done, after we've done the vetting and the testing and many, many steps to get to the point where now we're going to have one of our candidates interview with one of our clients. We have them engaged in that, the client engaged in that interview process, because ultimately they need to buy in that this is the right person as well.
Right.
And it's very noticeable. Some of our clients are very good at that interview, and some are not so good. And so they just understanding what you're looking for, understanding the culture, finding the right fit. It makes a big difference. Otherwise, like I said, you can get off where you're just you're talking to them, but you're not learning anything about them. So,
yeah, planning and being prepared is really crucial, and taking the time to really understand exactly what what the candidate is gonna, from a culture, from a demand, from a skill set up front. Do that hard work up front, and it'll save you a lot of time downstream. I think some other practical things that we've seen that can be really ways to prevent negative outcomes, and something that we used to do in my previous life in the military is, call it whatever term you want, but provide that new employee, that new candidate that's coming on board, a sponsor. In other words, somebody that's going to walk them through the process, really make sure that they're getting their questions answered. I think the first 2 weeks to a month are crucial to be able to get those guys acclimated, answer some of their questions. It's stressful. So I think that's one of the things that will remove some of the obstacles to get somebody over the hump. And we try to be very proactive about engaging and talking, but our model, of course, is our guys are deployed to your location. So it's crucial that you have somebody there on site. We're doing it as well, but it's so much better when you have somebody there that's working with them day in and day out to do that. So.
Yeah, no, the onboarding is critical. As you indicated, Tim, we kind of double down on it, or triple down on it, because we have multiple. We have a person whose primary role is to make sure that once they're there on site, that they're comfortable, their housing's good, they know where to go. The more detail, if you think about whether it's an employee you're hiring directly, or it's one that we're sending to you, that first day, think of it as, when you send your child to kindergarten for the first day. They have nothing but questions. They don't know, where do I park? Who do I ask for? What, all these types of things. And so having that sponsor, as we call it here, I think is, you get them through that first. Most negative outcomes, reality, happen in the first 1 to 2 weeks.
It really does, yeah. And this last point, it kind of fits in with that. And again, it has to do with certain employees, certain candidates are more outspoken. They're problem solvers. They see things that they think can improve the process. So they're there initially. They want to make an impact, and we've seen some negative outcomes come as a result of, you've got a new employee that's outspoken, that wants to, have some feedback and let you know what's going on. Well, a lot of times, we generally, if we've been somewhere, we've been doing something a certain way, we don't like somebody to come in and start telling us what we're doing is not great or not good. And so I think that there's two sides to that. One is, know the type of employee you're bringing on. Some tend to be a little bit more outspoken, and we tend to like that. We like people to have an opinion and speak out. But I would say, just to avoid losing an employee like that, communicate again to understand that, hey, they've got some feedback, they want to add value. Likewise, let them know, let's get your feet on the ground. Spend a few weeks here before you start telling us how to solve them. A company has been working for 30 years without them before they get there. So there's kind of some give and take there, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I think some of the best companies, they recognize on both sides, you have to have a level of self-awareness. The employer needs to have a level of self-awareness that they need to always be growing. And in order to be growing, if you're bringing in somebody, if you've got 20 people that have been there for 20 years, they've kind of become set in their ways. And so bringing in a new set of eyes, there's an opportunity. Now on the other side of that, the person that just showed up yesterday might want to learn a little bit before they just come in and tell everybody, hey, let me tell you how we should do this. So there's a balance to that, but I think it goes both ways.
Yeah, it does. And again, I think it gets back to when you're bringing that candidate, that new employee, the skill worker on board. What is it you're looking for? Do you want somebody that's outspoken? Do you like that? Do you value that in your organization, or do you like somebody that's just going to show up, do what they're told, and do their job? So that's part of the requirements up front, and I think that shouldn't be, understated. So those are some things that you might be able to do to help minimize that. And I think we'll finish up just by saying when it happens, because it's going to happen. When this happens to you, we track this very closely. We work on it all the time, and I think there's some things that you can do to really learn from it going forward. And the first thing we always do is we review every single one. We do a retrospective of every single negative outcome. We have a group of people that focus on getting all the facts, trying to understand the situation, personal situation, skill situation, everything involved. We bring it together and we try to first learn, did we do something? Did we miss something? What were the circumstances around that? So that's a huge part of what we do. And there's some other things that you can take from when this happens to you, right?
No, for sure. I think your point, Tim, is really strong. We do it. Obviously, we would encourage other companies to do it, and that is don't justify a negative outcome. Try to learn from everyone and try to figure out, is it did we not vet them properly? Did we not ask all these things that we've been talking about? You've got to go back and go, where did we miss this?
Mm-hmm.
Because somewhere in the process there's a failure. I mean, it's whatever it is. There's a failure that you have an opportunity to grow from, or just keep repeating it.
Yeah, I think the worst mistake you can make is not trying to hear from that person. Get feedback, especially if they left of their own accord. What was it about this? Or if it's one of our skill workers at a client, what can we do better next time? And then once you get that feedback, we are very, very, I'd say as a company, we value being self-aware. So if there's anything, even in a negative outcome scenario, if we own 20% of it, 10%, 5%, whatever, we're going to fully own that, and we're not just going to own it, we're going to do something about it. So the big thing you need to do is do the retrospect, find out what went wrong, be honest about it. It's not always this bad candidate, they weren't a good fit. Maybe they weren't a good fit because you didn't do a good job vetting them, or you put them with the wrong team or whatever. So figure that out and then implement some lessons learned. Put that into play in what you do. And I think it's crucial that you never accept a negative outcome as okay. Right. It should never be okay. It's part of the business, but there's always got to be something. We always strive for zero negative outcome. That's our ultimate goal. And I'm not sure we'll ever get there, but you'll never hear me back off that as our ultimate goal.
Right.
So,
well, it's like we everybody loves sports analogies. It's we always talk about teams that win consistently and teams that lose consistently. It becomes a mindset. It's as we say, losing or winning becomes habitual. You teach yourself. You mentally just assume that that's where we're going to be. So that's why I don't think you ever want to go, well, it's okay, let's just, we'll try to get them next time. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of companies just say, yeah, we have about 50% turnover. It's just what we have. And that's okay. Maybe it is, but usually there's something you can learn from it. I think the last point we wanted to make on this, Brett, is that for what we do to help companies, we essentially offload a lot of the risk and a lot of the negative consequences from companies by what we provide.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, if you take everything that we've talked about today, so a lot of, at Skillwork, a lot of, in our business, a lot of what we have built up is to reduce the impact of a negative outcome. And so we do an extensive vetting process. We ask a lot of questions of our client up front as to make sure that we're understanding the fit. We want to know, is it this kind of a plant, that kind of a facility, this type of a construction site? So we're doing those things. So we're trying to, so if a company is reality, depending on what level they're hiring at, but if they're experiencing a high level of turnover, one, you're going to move that risk to us, but
Right.
We're not just letting that risk, we're trying to reduce that risk by because it doesn't do us any good if we're seeing the same level of turnover that they're seeing, then that's not really the goal.
No.
But either way, we do our model, we own it. So if there's a negative outcome, we own that, because obviously, Tim, as we know, there's a lot of challenges, cost and so forth, when you have a negative outcome.
Yeah, and I mean, it's before when I was hiring a lot of full-time employees, and we still hire, our guys are full-time, but it was a challenge to be able to, once you brought somebody on board, to terminate them. It was a challenge, took time, took as much energy, if not more, to terminate somebody as it did to hire somebody. So for us, we own that risk. So it's as simple as our clients that it didn't work out for whatever reason that happens to be. It's simply you contact us, we take care of it, we make sure that you get a better fit. We learn from that going forward, but you then can continue focusing on running your business and moving forward. So we struggle. Well, I shouldn't say struggle. It's part of our challenge. We deal with this every day. It's part of our business, so you don't have to. So I guess that's really the main things we wanted to cover today with this topic of what we call negative outcomes, and trying to take a negative outcome and turning it into a positive in the hiring process is what we're all about here. So hopefully this gave you some things to think about and to consider on how to minimize that and minimize the impact of negative outcome occurrences for your company. We want to thank you for joining us here today. It means a lot to us that you take the time to listen to this. As always, reach out to us at Skillwork. You can hit us up at skillwork.com. Our contact information is there. We always look forward to talking to you.